What's going on? You're listening to King Cam's Ujumbe's podcast, and Ujumbe means message. And today's message is personal intimacy. And we have our very own Miss Domini Bryant, and she's going to talk a little bit more about that. Tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Like you mentioned, my name is Domini Bryant, and I am the Executive Director of the Inspired Learning Institute, where I specialize in developing programs, workshops, and seminars that demonstrate and exemplify connecting your passion, what inspires you, to learning and developing.
Okay. So where are you from?
Well, originally I am from Indianapolis, Indiana, but I currently live in Houston, Texas, which I call home. I have been here in Houston, actually going on 5 years now.
Okay.
This is home.
How you like the weather down there?
This is why I moved to Houston. I moved here for the weather and the dope Southern culture.
I understand. So what do you like to do?
So that's a loaded question because I am a life learner. So I like to do anything that provides me the opportunity to learn, expand my thinking. But I am a self-professed mermaid because I love the water. Yeah. And that's been a love of mine for a very long time that I passed on to my now adult son, who was a competitive swimmer for 11 years. So I was a swim mom. Oh, wow. And he is now made swimming his profession. He is a professional coach and swim instructor. So I feel like I've earned the mermaid badge. So I put that out there. I am definitely a self-professed mermaid. I am also very passionate about music and entertainment and the arts. So I love music, spoken word, poetry, theater. So I do a lot of those types of things. As well as museums. I love museums and just, the visual arts. Again, anything that expands my thought process, expands my ability to connect with information and messages in a creative way is what I enjoy doing.
Okay, so what can you tell us about, what is your stance on self-care, especially on personal intimacy?
So I am a social worker by trade. It's my second career. And so you hear self-care a lot. I mean, self-care has become, especially amid the pandemic, self-care has become a big buzzword. And so you see a lot of people, they refer to self-care, they get, a facial or a massage or get their hair done or their toes done and things like that. And those are all great forms of self-care. Working out, those are all great forms of self-care because the idea, right, is that you're doing something that is taking care of what you need in the moment at that time, or something that helps to relieve your stress and put your mind at ease or give you kind of that release. Well, in my personal intimacy workshop called Sensual Movements, we take that a step further.
Right.
So I really connect personal intimacy to self-care in a way that really expands the thought process about what self-care is.
Right.
Because I truly believe that self-care, it involves all of the senses and it involves the full person. So mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I believe that those are all a part of self-care. But a lot of times I think because of just culturally the way we operate in this day and time, things can be very surface. They can be very shallow in the moment. So what I teach in Sensual Movements is connecting to your idea of self-care with the intimacy that goes along with truly grounding yourself, discovering yourself, and kind of pouring yourself into yourself.
Right.
And I'll explain that by saying, if you think about when you have a friend that is, lost a loved one, or they're hurt, or they're in the hospital, there is an outpouring. There is you're doing all the things, you're praying for them. If you're a praying person, you visit them, you take them what they need. Like there's all of these things that one might feel to do in kind of an outpouring towards someone that needs help.
Right.
Well, what we learn in Sensual Movements is to how to have that outpouring to ourselves, where we are fully embracing everything that we need in the moment by moment, day by day. And so an example of that is, physical touch. If you are a parent, you have a real good grasp, a real firm idea of, what it means to, touch your children. If they get hurt, you reach out and you hug them, or you clean up the boo-boo. There's touch involved. And so that's one of the first lessons that we learn in Sensual Movements, and that's how to caress our bodies, how to caress our breath, how to caress the thoughts that are coming up. And we do that in a way that we work really hard at suspending judgment about, you might have a pain in your leg, but we're not going to focus on the pain. We're just going to rub the leg. We're just going to caress the curves. We're going to caress the divots in the knee. We're going to, caress the spaces, and we're not going to stop at the place where you might be feeling the pain. We're going to caress the whole leg. Right. But then when we do get to the place where, because obviously, we have areas of our life where there is pain, and oftentimes, it's painful enough that it can't be ignored. And so being fully present and pouring into ourselves, we have to pay attention to those areas that need further attention. And so what we do with that is we caress those spaces, and we address those spaces without judgment, without a preconceived notion about what it is or what it might be. And we use that time to really focus our attention on bringing the energy that we want in that area. So you have pain in your leg, we're going to caress that area, we're going to stroke that area, and we're going to speak life to that area. We're going to give energy to that area that is a healing energy.
Right.
And if you're a spiritual person, which I am, and I bring a lot of spirituality to the work that I do, one of the things that I teach is that by inviting the energy that you desire, you are inviting a divine presence to that space. And by inviting a divine presence to that space, you allow yourself to not have to take responsibility for knowing all the details, knowing the why, knowing the what. You can be the student in that moment, even though you're with yourself, for yourself. You can be a student in that moment because you've invited a higher power to assist you in that moment. And that's where we really start to dive into intimacy. Because what is more intimate than being a student to the divine power that created you?
Mm.
And inviting that divine power into your immediate space in the immediate moment for the immediate need that you have, without judgment, without expectation,
Right.
without a to-do list, but just a welcome to that moment to say, I am yielding everything that I think, or I think I know, or I, I'm going to yield those things to you in this moment, to this energy in this moment, to the healing that I need or that I'm wanting in this moment. I'm going to yield to that, and I'm just going to feel and caress and enjoy this experience. So that's a big part of how I connect intimacy to self-care, really walking through a journey with people that help them to suspend, their judgments, suspend their fears, suspend the things that generally hold us back and keep us in bondage to things.
Wow.
Especially what we bring to ourselves. Because a lot of times, we take classes, or we hear, or we listen to people that tell us, despite what they may say, or don't, worry about what they think about you. And, but when it's just you, we talk to ourselves in our heads.
Yeah. And
sometimes we are our biggest critics.
Well, and our worst enemy too.
Absolutely. And so so we practice in Sensual Movements, really sitting our critic on the sideline and having them be an observer of just the pure intimacy that comes when there are no expectations. There's no to-do list.
Right.
There's no deadlines. There's just you and the energy that you choose in that moment.
Because we do produce our own energy, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
We always talk about they're giving off this energy, this, that, or vibe, or whatever. But we bring our own energy sometimes. And so,
absolutely.
So how did you get into this? What was your inspiration to start your program?
So, the work that I'm doing right now is actually over 20 years in the making. I started my journey. It was a personal journey, honestly. I have always been a teacher. For one, that has always been kind of my personality, my nature. I've always been called to those spaces. I started teaching God's word at 12 years old. Did a lot of research, biblical research, and a lot of ministering and preaching and teaching throughout my youth, until my adulthood. And during that time, I learned a lot about just my unique entrance into the spiritual world. Because I've always just had a very down-to-earth kind of, it is what it is personality. And that's really what I brought to the spiritual space. And so I continually had people who would come to me, for advice and counsel. And, into my adulthood, it became a burden. You know, I started to notice that position was burdensome to me, to be perfectly honest with you. I went through a phase of wanting to not be the go-to person and not have this appointment and not have this responsibility. And so through that, there was just a series of events and situations that I, you know, engaged in that, you know, ultimately didn't serve me. And to be honest with you, no matter how hard I tried to run away from and hide myself from myself, somehow I kept finding myself. And there you are. Absolutely. And you know, and a perfect example of that is, you know, the very first time that I moved away from home, because I traveled a lot as a young person. And the very first time I moved away from home, I moved to New Orleans, Louisiana in a biblical outreach program.
Right.
And that is probably where the initial seed for the work that I'm doing now was actually planted. I was living in New Orleans, and like I said, I was a part of an outreach program through a ministry that my family was associated with. And it was an amazing Black woman that was one of the head coordinators of this program, which was an international program. There were, you know, over 20,000 people that were a part of this program, you know, globally. And there were 12 of us that were sent to New Orleans. And I just remember, you know, I was one of the younger of the crew. And listen, I was in New Orleans, Louisiana at 18 years old, and I was having a ball.
Oh, man.
And I wasn't taking responsibility for nothing. And I remember Miss Carmen, after we had been there for some time, I had broken probably every rule of the program by this point. And I definitely felt like I was the outcast, the black sheep of the team. And I was still doing, you know, the work that we were sent there to do, but I was definitely doing it my way.
Right.
And I remember, you know, Miss Carmen, her and her counterpart came to town to evaluate our team, and on two separate occasions. And so these are two people, the people that ran this program and coordinated this program were leaders that I valued greatly, had a great deal of respect and admiration for. So I was nervous when I heard that they were coming to town, because I knew they were going to get in my stuff about all the stuff that I'd been doing. And so I had a dinner with Miss Carmen, and then had a dinner with Mr. John. And these are two separate occasions. The two of them had not talked to each other before sitting down with me. And it was not the conversation that I thought it was going to be. Miss Carmen actually sat down with me, and I'm thinking she's going to chastise me. She's going to tell me, girl, you the only black girl in this group. You need to calm yourself down. I just knew that I was getting ready to get a tongue lashing. And that is not what happened. In fact, you know, her encouragement and her admonishment was that you are one of the most powerful individuals in this group. You make change. You inspire people. You move people. Everyone here, from the oldest individual to the youngest individual, in their individual meetings with her, all had testimonies about how I had helped them through and over something. And how what I was bringing to the table when I wasn't being a clown was a big component of how we were moving forward. And none of them had ever, had said these things to me. So, I just thought I was just being me. And then also, a couple days later, again, talking with Mr. John, it was the same thing. So he had interviewed several of the people that were a part of the programs that we were coordinating. And he said the same thing. He said, even the people that don't come to your fellowship, everybody had stories about how you have impacted them. And so it was in that moment, Miss Carmen, I remember, her saying to me, she was like, you've got it, girl. Even when you are not at your best,
right,
you are better than most.
Wow.
And that has always stuck with me.
That's how you know you're in the right place, because even when you are thinking that you're out of place, or whether it's in a different location, different school, or different neighborhood, or even a different city, you may feel out of place, but you are in the right place. So,
absolutely.
Dealing with Sensual Movements, what is the biggest challenge have you met with your role right now, especially dealing with COVID? What's your biggest challenge?
So the biggest challenge for me definitely is going virtual with Sensual Movements, because I am an energy person, and I am, I love engaging with people, and I feed off of people's energy. And so going virtual with Sensual Movements for the first time, it has been very challenging because I don't have the energy of the people right here.
Yeah.
And also, I think I will say too, I think another challenge with that is that people are afraid right now.
Yes, indeed.
And I think those fears are manifesting in ways that I don't think many people readily recognize.
Wow.
So people are not as willing to be vulnerable and to be open.
That's right. So how because even as a teacher, I keep asking the students, how you doing? What's going on? I pause between lessons or before we get started. I try to gauge the Zoom room to get a feel, because if they're not responding like they should or whatever, I pause everything and say, okay, what's going on? And because if we're live, I meet them at the door and I get to see them. How do you overcome this new challenge? How are you able to overcome it?
Well, to be honest, again, I'm a life learner. So I take seminars, webinars. I am always in somebody's classroom.
Right.
And so I recently, at the beginning of COVID, I retook a class on clarifying your message and connecting with your audience via Zoom or Skype. I don't remember what they called it, and I remember in that class, one of the things that, because I had taken that class before, it's through a group that I do public speaking with, and I had taken that class before, and so retaking it with the spin of having the barrier of being on the computer.
Exactly.
I remember her saying, continue to have your, and I don't remember the words that she used in her class, but I remember when she said it, I directly related it to a biblical research principle, or a biblical research understanding of the pregnant pause.
Right. Yeah.
So, where you are pausing with knowing that there's so much more to come after that pause, but pausing in that moment with the intention of giving space to that moment and giving life to that moment and that silence and that pause. And so that's a technique that I've been, really trying to master, especially with doing the, classes online.
Mm-hmm.
And I also teach online students. I teach students online. And so I've been using it in my classroom. And that is something that I think is really helping, because in Sensual Movements, we go through some very moving movements, some moving experience that bring up just a lot of emotion, and you're sweating, and and so what people generally expect is for things to crescendo and come to a burst or something.
Right.
And so what I found, though, when you execute that pregnant pause right at that moment where people are expecting to just burst open.
Exactly.
You find a pocket where you can truly connect, because you have all of this in you, but then I can stop and I pause, and I get close to the camera, almost like I'm gonna come through the camera.
Right.
And I ask them to just breathe.
Exactly.
Just take a moment and just breathe.
Because that's in that space. Because it's not just sensual movements. It could be anything. Some people call it the zone. Some people, some singer said, there's no space and time. It's like that place. And that pregnant pause, like you said, is part of that personal intimacy process. And
right.
I think that's the crux, or the main part. If you don't get that part, if you don't have that pause to breathe, reflect, or contemplate, or whatever, you miss the whole thing.
Well, and what you also, run the risk of in those moments, because again, people are so used to things just kind of coming to a head, and we can take, the things that are going on in our world right now, in this country right now. People are used to, things crescendoing and then coming to a, things just kind of blowing. Well, there is a great deal of discipline and self-control, but also an open freedom when you can hold that pause, hold that moment, not let it burst open, but hold it and then allow it to release. Not explode, but release. There is so much power in that. And I think that is definitely one of the ways that I've been able to kind of overcome having the barrier of being on the computer, is really helping people to come to that pause. And even though you might be breathing hard, and even though tears might even come to your eyes, just hold it long enough to savor the moment, to feel those feelings, let it settle in, let it, rumble around like it wants to just bust out, but you hold it, and then you release it. Changes the game.
Right. And so my thing is, when you are dealing with personal intimacy, do you get nervous in discussing this, or what?
So I don't anymore. But my nervousness comes from knowing that other people are nervous.
Gotcha.
And, so I deal with that. There's just a movement technique that I use when we start getting really deep in the conversation, where we begin with kind of the movement and the music that welcomes the conversation and kind of breaks the ice on the conversation. And then, just because my personality is kind of goofy, I always throw in something, that's kind of funny or that pokes fun at whatever, whatever the apprehension may be. And then because I can be, over the top, I go high into the over the top space so that people feel comfortable with falling somewhere in the middle or below where I am. So I give them the full Monty, and then I give them permission to just kind of be wherever you are in the space.
So I'm wondering, dealing with this sensual movement, in 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? What do you see the program?
5 years from now, what I would like to see is, my goal is to take over the world. So in 5 years, I would love to see sensual movement workshops being conducted, all over the country. My goal is to franchise Sensual Movements. And my target for the franchise is to see young adults. I would love, my goal is to see young women in their early 20s, the age that the age range that I was when Sensual Movements first started for me. I would love to see young women between the ages of, 20 to 35 really take this to another level and to use this as an opportunity of self-empowerment and financial empowerment.
Exactly.
Because that's really my passion, is to provide opportunities for young people to become entrepreneurs, to, be apprentice to the work that I do, as well as, to see themselves and to take kind of these templates and make them their own and turn them into whatever amazing thing that a young person can do. Because I just believe young people are going to get us there. So
exactly. That's right. So what would you tell that 20-year-old young lady right now? What is the message for that 20-year-old or 30-year-old individual that don't understand what's going on? What's your message?
You're enough. You're everything that you need to be right here, right now, in this moment, to have everything that you could possibly imagine. So just breathe, take it all in, and move forward.
That's exactly what they need to hear. Of course, I'm sure you'll tell them much more. Ms. Bryant, before we go, can you tell us where we can reach you, and is there any events or seminars we need to look out for?
So you can find me. I am Miss Inspire You on all social media platforms, on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. My website is currently under development, but it is inspiredlearning.institute.
Okay.
And I have a body of workshops that will be coming out in 2021. I am probably, Sensual Movements obviously is the first of the release. So I am currently in class with Sensual Movements right now. And it's the introductory workshop, which is required to move on to the other levels. So my goal is to release another introductory workshop for Sensual Movements before the first of the year.
Okay.
And then after this second wave of the introductory workshop cohort, the workshops will then begin to be released at least once a month. So by 2021, my goal is to have the full series of workshops out and running. So yeah, follow me on social media and you will see the rollout, and my website will definitely be up and running before the holiday. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. You're listening to King Cam's and Ujumbe's podcast, and Ujumbe meets message. The message is personal intimacy. Miss Bryant, thank you again for being my special guest tonight. Thank you again.
thank you so much. I am excited, and I'm proud to be able to share this message on your show.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll see you later.
All right, bye-bye.